Formafantasma. Yay! They are in town for the launch of Formation, which is their first gallery exhibition in the United States. Several of us just had the privilege of hearing about all the works in the show, or some of them, during a tour that was given across the street at Friedman Benda. So I thought we could use our time together now to dive deeper into the ideas in the show, and by extension, the ideas in Formafantasma's broader practice. As many of you know, the stories in Untapped look back to look forward. So this focus was inspired by our publisher, which is the design company Henry built, which follows the same approach. Untapped believes that there's a lot of knowledge out there about or around improving our everyday lives, but that it's often overlooked in an obsession with newness, hard to find, or explained in ways that don't make sense. Our stories identify and unpack that knowledge, explaining why it's significant and how it can be useful right now. In a similar way, Formafantasma believes that the past is a great source of wisdom and holds knowledge that designers ought to embrace, particularly when it comes to better shaping our lives, our communities, and our environment. Founded in 2009, Formafantasma's award-winning practice is extremely engaged with reality. For them, design is a tool for transformation and awareness. Trained as industrial designers, Andrea and Simone have applied a distinct approach to design, a signature mix of artfulness and advocacy, as someone once put it, to a range of clients and collaborators. Theirs is a commercial practice, and their work is primarily commission-based. But they always leave their mark, diving deep into their subject matter, which has ranged from volcano ash, forest ecosystems, and sheep, to things like planned obsolescence and the idealized concept of maternity. What I respect most about them is their honesty. They're obviously highly intelligent people, but they're also like, we don't know everything, and we want to learn from the past, and we want to learn from other people. And when we start something new, we don't necessarily know how it will end. So there's a vulnerability there, and an openness and a sincerity that I find very refreshing, and that we can't fake. The title of this conversation is Archetypes at Home, Making Objects that Influence and Endure. We're going to talk about formation, but also how it reflects who Andrea and Simone are, and what they value as both designers and as citizens of the earth. We'll have time for a few questions at the end, and the whole thing will be followed by a continuation of what was just happening. Before we get started, I just wanted to thank Friedman Benda for being so generous and making this conversation happen, and for trusting me to lead this conversation, and also to Andrew Zuckerman, who I haven't seen, but just for hosting us in the studio. Hi! Because we knew we'd need a lot of space. So I know you're all eager to hear from them. Please join me in welcoming Andrea and Simone. It's really weird reading something about someone when they're sitting right there, so that was a weird experience. Thank you for being here and for being open to talking. So you moved your studio from the Netherlands, where you lived for around 15 years, to your native Italy in 2022. And I understand this stems from both personal and professional reasons. Since then, it seems like domestic space is a subject that you're increasingly interested in exploring. Last year, Formafantasma did an exhibition called La Casa Dentro, so the home within, at the ICA Milano, which is, it kind of looked at home furnishings as sites of identity and memory and emotion and care. The 2024 edition of the Prada Frame Symposium also looked at domestic space, as does Formation. So my question is, how have you been thinking about home differently in the last recent years?
Well, it's interesting because when we started working as industrial designers, but also furniture designers, of course you engage with the
idea of domesticity. That has never been the focus of, or the force, the shape of what we were doing. Then when we relocated from the Netherlands to Italy, we went through a difficult moment in our lives because I lost my parents. And that led to a lot of, not only of course, readjustments regarding of course the experience you have with your family, but it has to do also with reflecting on the place you've been growing up, the house you've been living with your parents for many years, and how that, no matter if you never leave that place again, that still feels home. And we have been, for instance, thinking how when we started to study design and education, that shifted our perception of what is a good interior, what is domesticity, and so on. So we came to realize there's two dichotomies within us. One is the home and the ideal domesticity that we've been living, and the other one is the intellectual idea of domesticity. And I think this is becoming an obsession that we are interested in investigating, of what makes home home, and why also certain things historically have been deemed as undesirable, and how mostly the modernist movement, for instance, has been shaped our understanding what food design is, omitting, removing, censoring a lot of work that actually is contributing to the quality of our understanding of home. So on a very different level, I think formation is also tapping into that on a much more subtle level compared to, for instance, La Casa Dentro, which was very heavy-handed in that respect. And it was really looking at bent tubular metal, which is somehow a symbol of modernist furniture making, and overlapping it with other kind of interpretations of elements of domesticity, like embroidery, hand painting. This work is different, but what is interesting about it is that, and it's not how the work has been originated, but the place we live in Milan has cherry wood, and any of those pieces could directly enter in our own house. So it's the work that we've done that mostly come closer to our own taste. And we are really not interested in talking about this at all, and we're not interested in generating design based on taste. But it's just what happens with this work. So it's not a desirable or a desired intention, but it's just what it is.
Yeah, I remember also the first time we presented both La Casa Dentro, but also with Formation. It's the first time we are really talking also about us. You know, like most of our work since the beginning, in a way, was about something else. I mean, mostly about design and you know, all the problematics they are around the discipline we are really in. And La Casa Dentro instead was really a reflection on all the subjects that Simone was just mentioning. And definitely it was also related to the fact that we moved back to Italy. You know, we had been studying in Florence for many years, and both me and Simone, we met there, but we never lived in Italy, you know, especially our professional life.
Yeah, right.
So for us, it was also a very good moment to really understand what it means belonging.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about that a little bit later in the conversation. But I realize that a lot of folks don't know like the backstory of these two. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how you met and where you're from. Simone, I understand you grew up in Veneto, which is the northeast of Italy. And this is a place that I think is where there's a lot of production, particularly furniture production. I read that your father was a farmer, and you, which this is his words, not mine, were a design geek. And posters in your teenage bedroom were not of pop stars or fans, but of an exhibition by Enzo Mari, who was one of your design heroes. And Andrea from Sicily, which is a place where craft is a really big part of its artistic heritage. So you grew up believing that design was about objects, and it didn't really matter if they were industrially produced or not. As you were kind of saying, you both later did your bachelor's studies at the same university in Florence, but independently got there. So I'm curious, when you first met, what attracted you to one another?
I really want to know. I mean, we can tell the official story and the unofficial.
Yeah, tell both. Yeah, tell both.
So we met because we thought we were so smart and we wanted to work together. I saw them at a pool and he looked really hot. And I really felt, okay, I was seeing somebody and I thought, man, that's the guy I should be with.
Years ago, I mean, we're talking about 22 years ago, so we're...
Right, you were innocent, you didn't know any better. Yeah.
That's how it started. No,
Okay.
And then after 2 months we were living together. So, and since then we kept on living together. But I think, I mean, I'm happy of the question because at the end of the day, our work relationship originated from a personal relationship.
Yeah, right.
And we always say that the way we work is conversational. So it's not about drawing, it's not about sitting down at a table and planning anything, but it's an ongoing conversation that we have. That conversation translates from life to work constantly. I do have a memory that when we were still living in Florence, and we hated what we were doing at university, we moved there because the school we attended, many of the radical designers, practitioners in the 70s, like the Archetypes, in Somalia, they have been involved with that education, but then it was the 2000s, and the questions we were received were all about who's your target audience.
Right. Who do you want to, what kind of designer do you want to be?
I wish that was the question, was more how you produce something. So it was about shaping you as a tool for industry. So we hated that, and then we started, spending time together, going to exhibitions, and just by living together, we realized that what we're talking about at the end, it was about design. Not in terms of forms or shape and so on, but what makes life, what constructs politics of production, and that became, our founding,
Ethos or foundation.
Yes.
Yeah.
And of course, at the time, we were going every year at Salone del Mobile, and drop design at the time was like a very big and important movement of collective.
Dutch
Dutch
collective.
collective.
Some of you don't even know.
And then we understood that there was a generation there that had a voice, and that was not happening in Italy. In Italy we had these incredible maestros that really didn't let much space for the new generation.
We know that, yeah. Yeah.
I think it's probably the same.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later too.
And then I would say that we took our luggage and we went to study in Holland, and we did...
As a duo,
as a
so we applied as a duo.
Right, that's right.
We did all our studies as a duo, we graduated as a duo, the name was already there, so we came already us.
Right. Do you want to say really quickly what Formafantasma means in Italian?
Yes, of course. It means Gauss form or Gauss shape. And the intention behind it has always been that we never believe that design is exclusively a formal act, but that the process of developing of the final object or process or system, it is always about following a process, and the final outcome is a consequence of that process. Of course, people say they can recognize our work when we do it formally, but we never have formal conversation in the office of the department. We did part the work always originate other ideas and processes.
Okay. I have one more question about you, and then we can talk about the show. I found this really old photo of you that you have used in presentations past, and I don't know if it was staged, and I don't know. It was taken a while ago, but I printed it out because it made me think, it made me wonder about how you work together. Do you know this one?
It was not
Yes,
staged.
it was not staged.
So Andrea's like gesturing, like, what are you doing? And then Simone's like looking away, or he's maybe listening, drawing, and getting to work, which is so different from what a lot of us know from Untapped from public facing. It's like Simone's always talking, and so is this an accurate depiction of how you work together?
I think it's a very good photo that shows how we
The table would be even more empty now. I think it would not even be mostly there's anything on top of the table now.
Yeah.
And then the rest comes much later.
What about the personality traits though? Like who's the leader? Like how does that work?
There are different leaders. I mean,
Yeah.
we are all complex humans, so I can
He's the one
lead
that talks.
and then this.
I'm doing all the rest.
Got it. Okay, let's talk about formation, which may or may not be a fiancé reference. The object.
Why not?
Ah,
Why not?
why not? I watched the music video and I think it works. Like,
I mean, look, that's our favorite song from USA. So
yeah,
there we go.
right, yeah. The objects in the show look really different than previous design collections that we've seen from these two. And I read that in the studio you're always asking yourselves why. Why are you doing whatever you're doing? It's a means to kind of question yourselves and to push yourselves forward. So why did you make the objects in formation?
It's a layering of different whys.
Yeah.
So first of all, we started having this conversation with Friedman Benda regarding the idea of archetype. And I think, when you start to work, it's more or less 15 years, maybe more, that we are working as a design office. Sometimes I think in this moment, this collection is reflecting how we feel in this moment, and the feeling that we don't need to overstate anything, that you can include ideas without overloading objects with a sense of self-expression. There is this old text that I think we read many, many years ago, which is called The System of Objects from Baudrillard, where he's trying to describe that objects, they never just are, they also represent other things. It's obvious sort of, it's like the clothing is very evident, it's never just a piece of clothing, it's also a part of identity and so on. But with these collections and with the idea of archetype, we're trying to make sure that the objects do have a specific identity, that they do belong to the contemporary time. But they simply also just try to be what they are without overstating anything about who we are as designers and so on. Also, there's a lot of, I struggle to, okay, I'll say what I think.
Well, we can talk, I can prompt you also because we've talked about
No,
this.
but it's just that I don't want to, that what I'm about to say, that sounds like criticism towards anybody, but we really did not want the objects that we designed because they are in a limited edition. They are forced to become somehow overstating and overtly expressive. And we felt that we were confident enough to think that we can just design objects that are extremely subtle and work on proportions, on composition, on choices of material that are extremely considered. And they say exactly what they want them to say, but just with a few things. So the wood, apparently wood and aluminum, working with a very specific finishing of aluminum that reminds you of, Apple computers. Cherry wood, which is so iconic of American design. These are all details, but they do say things already, and you don't need to overload things with other things. This is not to say that what we will do next will be in this way. Maybe we'll do something extremely opulent and it's going to be fine. It's just that this is what we want to do in this moment in time. Also, there's something so difficult that we're all going through with the political climate globally. I'm not talking only the US, and somehow it felt that it was important that these collections felt sort of to the point and not overly taking attention also.
Yeah. Let's push this a little bit further, I think, because I also wanted to talk about how formation fits into the larger contemporary design landscape. You kind of just did what you've spoken about in the past, how you are not fans of design that's solely a means of self-expression or solely about spectacle. But Like, that's exactly the kind of thing that's often celebrated in contemporary design. One of the essays in Formation's exhibition catalog is written by Glenn Adamson, who, the writer and curator and historian and our friend, who I don't know if he's here, I don't think he is, but he wrote about this subject really nicely, and I just wanted to read it. He said, or he wrote, "If Formation looks restrained in comparison to Formafantasma's own earlier work, it is positively severe in relation to the sculptural, expressive objects that are often shown at Friedman Benda and its peer galleries. Individualism, too, can become formulaic, and without wishing necessarily to critique other designers, Chomaki and Ferguson wanted to carve another pathway to show how expansive precision can be." So I just want to talk about this for a second. Like, could you tell us about this other pathway that Formation takes and the significance of showing it at Friedman Benda in 2025?
Completely. Well, it is a bit what we just mentioned, but I really like the words of Glenn. I think we just wanted to get everything in the work that felt super intentional. And it is a monastic collection. It's not the case that in the center of the room there is a desk. And it's a very small desk. And who has a writing desk? Nobody has a writing desk nowadays. But you could still sit down there and work on your laptop. But what we like about those proportions is that it's not a desk. You cannot do everything with that desk. The sort of precision, the sort of sense of focus is what we wanted to have in the collection. I think it's the feeling that we have for what is important to do in this moment. And it's not a statement that we necessarily want to do all the time in the future. I think, as I said before, we have different kinds of people. Our personality is complex. A few days ago, somebody, or maybe it was yesterday, somebody said, you do so many different works. They are so different from one another. And you work for industrial clients, you curate exhibition, you design exhibition, you design objects. And we feel that in this moment, we are grown up enough to trust that we don't need to be one thing because we're not a brand. We are human beings, and our work is tied to who we are and to what we believe in. And we want to be as complex and as multifaceted, as chaotic, if it is the case to be, or as precise as we want to be. What I want to have is freedom.
Also, before, I think when we started our studio, and I think about specific projects like Botanica that we presented in 2010, it was really dealing with, for instance, plastic made by natural or vegetal origins. Those pieces were very narrative. And the more we were going ahead with our career and work, we were trying all the time also to embed research also within the object, or to show research close to the object. And the last project that I felt was still in that realm of combination between object and research was Forest Stream. There was a commission between the National Gallery of Victoria in Australia and then Triennale in Milan, where we did a big research into electronic waste. But still the research was shown close to the object, and there were objects.
Yeah.
From that moment on, we also freed the research from the object. So all the collection that we did after that, or the project we did after that, like Cambio at the Separating Gallery, or Terra you were mentioning before, the project about wool and sheep, which at the moment is at the 70s, really free the research from visualizing through the object. And also we learned that as designers we can have very different tools to discuss different topics. We do it through education, getting involved a lot in building also design courses, like the design course in Eindhoven, or we do the talks with Prada, the Prada frame talks we do every year for Salone, or we do exhibition design. So we really tried also to differentiate our work, but for the need also of having more tools to discuss what we feel is relevant. And if we need to talk, maybe it's better to do it through a conference than maybe having object talks. You know what I mean? Like this, like division between object and other medium for us is something that we are trying to explore more and more in our work.
There is another element that was in that text. It's